There is a pain, a very particular kind of solitary agony in the act of finally, after years of silence, admitting to the deepest wound inside you, only to find you are now comforting the hand that held the knife. That is where I live now. A sterile, airless space that used to be the comfortable, well-worn living room of a 12-year marriage. It's a cruel irony, this pain of admitting pain. D-Day, we call it. A clinical, sharp name for the day my world became a jigsaw puzzle scattered on a cold floor. It was 12 years ago when Sarah, my wife, my WW, as the online forums tragically label them, was 41 and I was 43. 12 years. A lifetime measured in quiet mornings, shared cups of coffee, 2 family vacations to the coast, and a million unspoken, suppressed moments that were supposed to be foundations, but were in fact bricks mortared with lies of omission. The affair itself was a flash fire, a brutal, short-lived electrical surge. It was over almost before it began, and she admitted it immediately. That, I always told myself, was the saving grace, the honesty. But looking back, maybe it was just the panic, the fear of discovery that eclipsed the chance for her to truly hide. I'll never know. The first things I said to her were an immediate, reckless, and catastrophic act of self-betrayal. I looked at her, trembling, mascara running, the physical embodiment of a moral collapse, and my voice, the voice of the man who was supposed to be furious, broken, demanding answers, came out soft, almost nurturing. I said, and the words still feel like ash on my tongue, "I still love you. It's going to be okay. Go take a shower." Go take a shower. As if the betrayal was just dirt, a physical stain that could be washed away with soap and water. I was the one who needed the cleansing. I was the one who had just swallowed a whole ocean of corrosive poison. We were in the kitchen. The fluorescent light of the late afternoon felt too harsh, too revealing. The air was thick, like breathing through wet linen. I remember the smell of stale coffee and the faint scent of her perfume, now tainted with something I couldn't name. I watched her walk away, and in that vacuum, that moment of utter silence, I didn't explode. I didn't shatter. I simply imploded. The collapse was internal, silent, immediate. I folded in on myself like a dying star. Afterward, the recovery was quick, too quick. A few questions, a handful of boundaries set, the kind of flimsy, easily broken guardrails you put up when the real, necessary walls have already come crashing down. And then we moved on with life, or at least we pretended to. My self-esteem, it didn't just drop. It plummeted into a Marianas Trench of worthlessness. I became a ghost in my own skin, a supporting character in the story of my life. She made a request, a plea, really. She begged me not to tell his wife. Her AP, the other man, the ghost who would haunt my bedroom for the next 12 years, had 2 kids under 5. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed and full of a desperate parental anxiety, and asked me to protect his family from her mistake. I agreed. I agreed. The logic I used to justify that monumental silence was a lie. If it would help us move past this, I wouldn't tell. But the real reason? I was already so deep in the abyss of my own self-hate that I believed I had no right to inflict pain on anyone else. I had become the protector of her secret, the keeper of his family's peace, and the executioner of my own truth. The universe, however, has a sick, dark sense of humor. Spoiler alert, he didn't stop. His next affair, months later, was the one that outed him. His next AP, a woman with less guilt and more of a taste for chaos, did what Sarah and I had shielded his wife from. They've got divorced. I remember reading the quiet, clipped notice in the local paper, a tiny paragraph about the dissolution of a partnership, and feeling a strange, hollow satisfaction, a sense of perverse justice that I had done nothing to earn. I locked it all away. I didn't tell anyone about the affair. Not my best friend, not my brother, not my therapist at the time, who was more interested in my career trajectory than the subterranean tectonic shifts in my marriage. And critically, fatally, I didn't tell her how it made me feel. I boxed it all up. All the shame, the rage, the sense of being irreparably damaged merchandise. I ate it like a shit sandwich that wouldn't stay down, a toxic meal that had to be re-eaten every once in a while, chewed on and swallowed again, just when I thought it had finally passed through my system. And the measuring started. It became an insidious, unconscious ritual. Every time Sarah was tired, every time she chose a book over my embrace, every time a request for intimacy was met with a sigh or a rolled eye, I did measure myself against this mystery man, the phantom lover. Was he taller, more decisive? Did he make her laugh harder? Was his touch more confident, less burdened by the weight of 12 years? I did this every time I was sexually rejected, every time I was emotionally dismissed, every time I felt unattractive, unwanted, or unworthy of love. The tape measure of his existence was always there, unspooling from my heart. The truth is, he didn't have to exist anymore for me to destroy myself with his memory. The idea of him, the symbol of her ability to choose someone else, was the real weapon. A couple of months ago, the vault finally cracked. The pressure became unbearable. I had a bit of a breakdown, a seismic shift that started as a small tremor of anxiety and escalated into a full-blown, weeping, gasping collapse in the laundry room, surrounded by clean towels and the smell of fabric softener. It was undignified, embarrassing, and absolutely necessary. That moment, that messy, terrifying surrender to the pain, is what finally brought us to therapy, a last-ditch effort, 12 years too late, to dismantle the bomb I had been carrying in my chest. We've been going for 8 weeks now, and I can't decide if that was the right thing. The silence was a shield, a flawed, heavy, uncomfortable thing, but it was a shield nonetheless. The truth, however, is a wrecking ball. Since we started therapy, since I finally felt permission to speak, we have been arguing so much more. The quiet, comfortable veneer of our moved-on life has been shattered, replaced by the sharp, jagged pieces of reality. I absolutely dumped a truckload of my feelings out. Weeks of sessions where the dam finally broke. Torrents of 12 years of suppressed resentment, fear, and deep existential questioning. I laid out the meticulous archive of scars that I had kept, the moments I felt dismissed, the constant internal comparison, the gnawing belief that I was second best. My wife says she is glad I told her everything. She says it with a tremor in her voice, a mix of relief and terror. But the but is a chasm.
But her reactions, her sudden violent collision with the reality of the damage she caused, her guilt, her self-loathing, the sudden sharp, almost physical pain she now carries. All of this leads to self-hate. And now, I, the wounded man, the one who finally admitted his pain, am trying to help her past her reactionary pain. I am the patient, but I am also the triage nurse. The script is flipped in the most agonizing way imaginable. She feels blindsided, and in a terrifying way, she's right. We hadn't discussed the affair in over a decade. We buried it so deep that, for her, it became a piece of ancient history, a bad dream she barely remembered. She says she never thinks of it. She barely remembers the details, the name of the hotel, the date, the precise texture of the shame. For her, it was a mistake she made, she apologized for, and the contract, as she understood it, was that we moved on. For me, it was the day the earth cracked and the magma of doubt started flowing, unseen beneath the surface of my life. I dropped all this accumulated pain, this nuclear waste of memory on her. And her response is not defensive anger, but a profound, paralyzing conviction that she isn't worthy of my love, that she doesn't deserve the beautiful, complicated life we've built, the house with the crooked fence, the dog that sleeps on the sofa, the quiet synchronicity of our routines. I've been trying to protect her from what I felt all these years because, and this is the absolute core of my emotional malfunction, I don't like to see her hurt. If she's hurt, I'm hurt. Her pain mirrors mine, amplifies it, and I can't let this run down a spiral. I've always been the fixer, the stable element. I couldn't fix the affair, so I fixed the aftermath by containing it within myself. And now, I can't even allow the legitimate, necessary consequence of my speaking the truth to manifest as her guilt. It's a sickness, this need to shield her. It's manifesting even in therapy. I'm trying to protect her from some of our therapist's questions. Dr. Elena Rivas, a sharp, empathetic woman with a steady, disconcerting gaze, asks things that cut too close to the bone for Sarah. Questions about the why, the what was missing, the details Sarah has successfully compartmentalized and forgotten. I'll jump in, change the subject, deflect. I don't think they're constructive, I tell myself. But the truth is, I'm trying to protect her from the full weight of her moral responsibility, because that weight is crushing her, and if she crushes, I lose her. I don't want to dissect every single pain point, not anymore. That's the part she doesn't understand. The goal for me was never to punish her or to force her to relive the moment. I just wanted to be heard. I wanted my pain to be acknowledged, to be pulled out of the shadows and given air. I wanted her to finally understand that I need some help letting go of it. I want a partnership in the healing, not just a confession booth. Instead, I'm terrified. I'm afraid that my wife's self-hate, this toxic byproduct of my necessary truth, will drive a wedge in our marriage. I'm afraid I'll lose everything I've been trying to save this whole time. The house, the life, the comfortable, if somewhat tainted, rhythm of our existence. It's an impossible, tough spot to be in. The wound is open, but I can't stop to staunch my own bleeding. Who will comfort me? Who will hold my hand while I have to comfort the only person that knows the full depth of my pain, the only person I want to comfort me, and who, devastatingly, was the original source of that pain? The irony is a jagged blade in my gut. The truly crazy part, the part that makes this a farce of healing, is that I did forgive her a long time ago. Genuinely, I don't hate her. I don't want to leave her. I truly love this woman, and I will continue to love her until I'm unable to draw breath. I've had to keep explaining this to her, but she can't hear it over the screaming of her own guilt. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, I tell her, my voice raw with exasperation. The scars have an acute memory. They pulse with the changes in the emotional atmosphere. I don't really know what I'm looking for here. Not in this moment, in this silent space between the sessions. Maybe a safe space that my therapist can't seem to provide because she's too focused on the clinical deconstruction of the past. Maybe advice on how to explain this to Sarah, how to make her see that her self-punishment is only compounding my misery, how to make her understand that the gift of her own self-forgiveness is the only way she can truly give me back the partner I lost. I'm going to shut down the divorcer and move on comments before they even start. I've seen them. The internet chorus of the righteous and the single-minded. They don't understand. I truly love this woman. My eyes are open on who she is, and I see all of her flaws. The terrible, human-sized ones, and the small, endearing ones, like the way she always leaves a faint lipstick stain on the rim of her coffee cup. Regardless of those flaws, I love her. I'm not angry in the explosive sense. I'm not confused about her character. I'm just looking for some compassion, a little support, a roadmap out of this solitary, shared hell. I am seeking a way to heal without becoming a self-immolating martyr. The next session is on Tuesday. I have 2 days to figure out how to stop being her shield and start being her partner again. I have 2 days to decide if I'm strong enough to let her hurt so we can both finally heal. I walk into the garage. It's cool and smells of motor oil and sawdust. My sanctuary. I run my hand over the hood of my old muscle car, a project I started 5 years ago and haven't touched in 3. It's an analogy for my marriage. Complex, beautiful, fundamentally sound, but currently disassembled, with vital parts lying scattered, waiting to be reconnected. I lean against the workbench. The fluorescent bulb above hums, the only sound. I need a new strategy. I can't keep sacrificing my peace for her fragile stability. I need a lever, a point of entry that bypasses her defenses, a way to explain that her guilt is a betrayal of my forgiveness. I close my eyes. Flashback. 12 years ago. The small, sickly sweet scent of the cheap hotel soap on her skin when she came out of the shower. She was wearing my old t-shirt, too big for her. She looked like a child who had done something terrible and was waiting for the inevitable spanking. I still love you. It's going to be okay. That was the mistake. The immediate absolution. I didn't give her the necessary space to earn it, and I didn't give myself the necessary space to grieve. We skipped the messy, awful, essential middle part of recovery. We jumped from the crime to the cover-up, and now 12 years later, the cover-up is failing spectacularly. I pick up a wrench, its weight comforting in my hand. I have to find a way to make her see the difference between guilt and responsibility. Guilt is corrosive. Responsibility is constructive. Guilt drives you inward. Responsibility drives you to action. I remember another detail, one I suppressed for years. The day after D-Day, before we had the talk about his wife, I found a receipt, tucked into the pocket of a pair of jeans she was about to throw in the wash. A receipt from a florist. A single, expensive, long-stemmed white rose. I asked her about it. She said she bought it for me, as a spontaneous gesture of love. A lie, or at least a half-truth, delivered with a conviction that almost sold me. I took the rose, put it in a vase, and watched it die slowly. But the lie, that small, unnecessary obfuscation, was the pebble that started the avalanche of my doubt. Did she buy it for me, or did he? Was it a token of regret, or a prop for the performance of a penitent wife? I never asked again. I never brought it up. The weight of that single, dying white rose has been in my chest for 12 years. I open my eyes. The silence in the garage is broken only by my ragged breathing. I will not continue to be the archive of our scars. I need to open the vault, not just to her, but with her. Maybe the next session, I need to stop protecting her from Dr. Revis's questions. Maybe the only way out is through. Maybe I need to let her feel the full, agonizing weight of her past mistake so she can finally feel the lightness of the future she still has with me. I put the wrench down. I have a new goal: to make Sarah see that my forgiveness is not a fragile gift that her guilt can shatter, but an active will, a solid commitment that demands her healing. Because if she can't heal, then my 12 years of silence, my implosion, my breakdown, all of it will have been for nothing. And that, more than the affair itself, is the one betrayal I will never be able to survive. I will make her understand that her self-hate is the final, most devastating infidelity. It is the rejection of my love.
The drive to Dr. Revis's office on Tuesday feels less like a journey toward healing and more like a slow, deliberate march toward a firing squad. I am the prisoner, but also, disturbingly, the warden. I'm driving an hour ahead of schedule, a nervous energy thrumming through my hands on the steering wheel. Sarah is quiet beside me, her gaze fixed on the passing urban sprawl, a blur of concrete and glass. She looks drawn, older than 41. The guilt is etching itself onto her face, pulling down the corners of her mouth, deepening the lines around her eyes. I see it, and immediately the old compulsive urge to comfort her rises up like bile. Stop that, I tell myself. Let it be. This is the consequence. If you erase her pain, you erase your own chance to be seen. I pull into the empty parking lot of the professional building, the afternoon sun glaring off the tinted windows. We still have 40 minutes. Why are we so early, Matt? Her voice is small, reedy. I needed to talk to you first, before the session. I turn off the ignition. The silence in the car is dense, suffocating. She turns to me, her eyes clouded with an immediate defensive fear. About what? Are you second-guessing this? Because I don't know if I can handle— Stop. I interrupt her, the word sharp, but my tone is gentle, measured. Stop spiraling. I'm not leaving you. I'm not saying divorce. I already shut down those comments, remember? I love you. That's not the question. The question is, how do we stop drowning each other? She shrinks back slightly, the accusation of drowning hitting its mark. I don't understand. I'm doing everything right. I'm going to therapy. I'm listening to your feelings. I admitted it all again. I've accepted that I'm a terrible person. That's the problem, Sarah. I lean closer, my elbow resting on the center console. Your self-hate is the new affair. It's the new wall between us. Her brow furrows in confusion, but also a flicker of genuine shock. How can you say that? My self-hate is a direct result of what you did to me. It proves I understand the damage. It proves I'm sorry. It proves nothing but that you're suffering. And that suffering is demanding my energy, my focus, my comfort. I spent 12 years suffering in silence, trying to protect you from the truth of my pain because I didn't want to see you hurt. And now that I've finally found the courage to speak it, you've flipped the script. I am the wounded party, the victim of the betrayal, and yet here I sit, needing to constantly reassure and comfort the perpetrator. I pause, letting the harsh truth hang in the air between us, heavy as a shroud. Your guilt, Sarah, is a refusal of my forgiveness. The statement lands like a physical blow. Her mouth drops open. Her eyes, usually so quick to well up, are wide, dry, and stunned. That's cruel, Matt. That's unfair. I haven't refused anything. I can't process how you can still love me. I am fundamentally broken in your eyes, and that knowledge is paralyzing me. I don't feel worthy of the life we built. Every night I look at you sleeping and I feel like a thief. Exactly. I lean forward again, my voice low and urgent. "You feel like a thief, and I feel like I'm watching you bleed out from a self-inflicted wound. Do you understand the cycle we're in? I confess my pain, which triggers your guilt. Your guilt makes you feel worthless. Your worthlessness drives you away from me emotionally. That distance confirms every insecurity I carried for 12 years, that I'm unworthy, unattractive, easily replaced. I try to pull you back from the brink of self-loathing by comforting you, which means I re-swallow my own pain to make space for yours. It's a closed loop of codependent cruelty, and it has to stop." I take her hand. It's cold and limp in mine. "The love I have for you is not conditional on your perfection. It's a choice, an act of will. I chose to forgive you the day you confessed. I chose to build this life with you. But your constant self-flagellation, that is you rejecting my choice. It is you telling me that my love is misplaced, that my judgment is flawed, that I am a fool for staying. And that is the final, most devastating infidelity you could commit." She pulls her hand away, not out of anger but distress. She covers her face with her hands, a choked sob escaping her throat. "I never thought of it that way. I thought the pain I was feeling was the penance, that if I hurt enough, it would somehow balance the scales. The scales don't need balancing with pain. They need balancing with healing and partnership. I don't want you to forget. Forgetting is dangerous, but I want you to take responsibility for the future, not just carry the dead weight of the past. I want you to be strong enough to stand next to me while we look at the scar together without collapsing."
I let her cry for a minute, the only sound the faint, distant traffic noise. "In there," I say, nodding toward the office building. "Dr. Rivas is going to ask the tough questions. She's going to ask about the why. She might ask about the details you've conveniently forgotten. For 12 years, I protected you from those questions, both hers and my own. I jumped in, I deflected, I didn't want to see you break. Today, I'm not doing that. You need to answer them. You need to face the ugliness, not because I want to punish you, but because the truth is the only disinfectant for the shame you're carrying. I need to know you are strong enough to face the facts so I can finally trust that you're strong enough to face the future with me. Do you understand?" She slowly lowers her hands. Her face is streaked, but her eyes are clear, focused on mine. The fear is still there, but now mixed with a sliver of steely resolution. She nods, a single, profound nod. "I understand. I'm sorry, Matt, for all of it, for the affair, and for making your silence my emotional sanctuary. I will try." The air in the car changes, growing lighter, almost breathable. We sit in silence until it's time to go in. The session starts quietly. Dr. Rivas senses the shift, the new tension in the room. She is a master of the slow, deliberate escalation. "Sarah, Matt told us last week about the emotional archive he's been keeping, the silent measurement of himself against the other man, the fear of being dismissed, unwanted. Can you talk to me about what it's like to realize the cost of a mistake you thought was paid in full 12 years ago?" Sarah's voice is shaky. It's the horror of realizing you've been living a lie, but you were the one who created the lie in the first place. I genuinely thought we were okay, that we had moved on. I told myself he forgave me. I barely remember the details of the affair. It was so short, so meaningless. But for Matt, it was the start of a 12-year sentence, and I was the warden who forgot I locked the door. "You said you barely remember the details, Sarah." Dr. Rivas leans forward, her tone clinical. "That suggests a severe compartmentalization, a deliberate emotional amnesia. Why do you think your mind allowed you to forget the specifics? Was it to protect yourself from pain, or to protect the marriage from further discussion? She shifts uncomfortably in her chair. She glances at me, and I give her the barest, most neutral of looks. Don't jump in, Matt. Don't be the shield. To protect myself, mostly, she whispers. It was too ugly to keep in the front of my mind. It felt like a toxic wound I had to close quickly. But Matt mentioned the questions, the why. I've never really answered that, not honestly. I told myself it was because I felt unattractive, that I needed external validation. But that's a facile answer. She takes a deep, shuddering breath. I watch her, my heart hammering a strange rhythm of terror and anticipation. This is the moment, the truth she's never spoken. The truth is, I was lonely. Not physically, we were always together, but emotionally. Matt was becoming consumed by work. He was building his career, and I was running the home, raising the kids. We had a rhythm, a routine, but the connection was fading. I felt like a functional part of his machine, not his partner. And then the AP. He was a coworker. He noticed me. He was present. He asked me about my day, and he actually stopped and listened to the answer. It was a cheap thrill, an emotional shortcut, but it felt like I was being seen for the first time in years. This is new. The depth of the emotional loneliness is a new layer of excavation. I had always framed it in my mind as a purely physical, reckless mistake, an act of selfishness. This admission of a deep marital disconnect stings with a different kind of venom. It suggests my own complicity in the decay of the emotional landscape. Dr. Rivas presses her point, her voice gentle but firm. And the connection you felt with this man, the sense of being seen, did you communicate that feeling of emotional neglect to Matt before the affair? Sarah looks down at her hands. No, I didn't. I hinted. I complained about his long hours. I sighed about the lack of date nights. But I never articulated, I feel invisible to you, and I am close to choosing someone who sees me. Why not? Because I didn't want to hurt him. The words burst out, a sudden, desperate cry of defensive pain. I knew he was working hard for us. I saw the stress. I couldn't add my own emotional burden to his plate. So I shut up. I swallowed it. Just like Matt swallowed the affair. We are both masters of the self-destructive, codependent silence. I close my eyes briefly. She's right. The self-destructive silence is a family trait. The same fear of inflicting pain that kept me from telling her how much I hurt, kept her from telling me how much she needed. A perfect symmetrical disaster. Matt, Dr. Rivas turns to me. Sarah is suggesting that the conditions for the affair were rooted in a pre-existing pattern of emotional suppression in the marriage, that her failure to speak was mirrored by your own fear of confrontation. Does that resonate with you? I open my eyes. I'm no longer the shield. I am the participant. I say, my voice steady, surprising myself with its calmness. It resonates. I was obsessed with stability, with building the external life, the fortress, the house, the savings, the security. I forgot that the internal life, the emotional infrastructure, was the foundation. Her admission of feeling invisible, that's painful. It shifts the blame, yes, but it also gives me a specific target for what I need to rebuild. It doesn't shift the blame for the infidelity, Matt, Dr. Rivas corrects gently. It explains the environment. The affair was still Sarah's choice, her responsibility. I know, I nod. But her guilt right now, that's her focusing on the choice part.
I need her to start focusing on the environment part, on the rebuilding. I told her just before we came in that her self-hate is the new affair. It's the final, most devastating infidelity, because it's a rejection of my choice to forgive her and a refusal to participate in the future. I need her to stop trying to pay penance and start trying to heal, for her and for me, because if she collapses, I lose my anchor. And I've been holding this boat steady for 12 years. I'm tired.
My confession of exhaustion, of the profound, bone-deep weariness, hangs heavy. It's the most honest thing I've said in this room. Sarah is crying again, but this time it's a different cry. Less self-pity, more realization. She reaches out and takes my hand across the space between the chairs. This time, I hold firm. I don't want to be the reason you drown, Matt. I don't. Then stop being the anchor that pulls us down, I urge her, squeezing her hand. Be the sail. Give us the power to move forward. Accept my forgiveness as a gift, not a judgment. Your healing is the only thing that can truly heal me. The session ends with a tentative plan. Sarah will start working on specific self-compassion exercises, focusing on her intrinsic worth separate from her mistake. And I will commit to clearly articulating my needs for comfort and validation, rather than resorting to the self-sacrificing silence that has been my default. We drive home in a different kind of silence. The tension has been replaced by a quiet, shared exhaustion. The wall hasn't been demolished, but a crucial window has been opened. The moment we walk in the door, she turns to me. The rose. I freeze. The rose. The small, white, expensive rose I found the receipt for the day after D-Day? The one she claimed was for me. What about it? You never asked again. I knew you saw the receipt, you put it in a vase and watched it die, but you never asked me directly. Was it for me, or was it a gesture for him? I lean against the kitchen counter, my heart thumping. 12 years. This phantom rose has been a thorn in my mind for 12 years. I didn't ask because I was afraid of the answer, because I was already so deep in self-doubt that I thought the lie would be easier to manage than the truth. She looks at me, tears gathering again, but her expression is resolved. It was for me. I bought it for myself. The day after the affair, I was in a fugue state. I drove past the florist and I saw the white roses. I wanted a symbol, a pure thing to hold on to, a stupid, desperate gesture to myself, trying to convince myself that I wasn't entirely tainted. I told you it was for you because the idea of explaining the profound, solitary self-loathing that made me buy a rose for my own penance was too much. It was a lie born of shame, Matt, not an attempt to protect him. A wave of strange relief washes over me. The truth, even the small, ugly truth, is less corrosive than the prolonged uncertainty. The rose wasn't a secret exchange with the AP. It was a private act of self-soothing, a desperate woman looking for a lifeline. It was pathetic, but not malicious. Thank you, I say. The words simple, profound. Thank you for finally telling me. I didn't realize how much the ambiguity of that one moment was still affecting me. I didn't realize how much my silence was still protecting me at your expense, she replies. We embrace in the kitchen, not a passionate hug, but a supportive, tired holding. We are two soldiers finally, standing side by side, surveying a long-abandoned battlefield. The war is still being fought, but for the first time in 12 years, we are fighting it together.
The next layer of the truth has been peeled back, revealing a deeper, more complicated narrative, one where our mutual fear of causing pain led to a shared, slow-motion emotional suffocation, the quiet, codependent cruelty of silence.
The fragile peace we found after the confession about the white rose was temporary, a short intermission before the next act of the psychological drama. The release of that small truth that the rose was an act of solitary shame, not a cover-up for the AP, should have been a complete closure on that particular file. Instead, it opened up a new line of questioning in my mind, a more insidious type of doubt that I hadn't wrestled with before. If Sarah was capable of such profound protective silence about something as small as a flower, a silent lie she maintained for 12 years purely out of shame, what else was she capable of burying? This isn't about the affair details anymore. I know the when, the where, and now the underlying why, the emotional invisibility she felt. This is about her character, her capacity for compartmentalization. My mind, that treacherous, tireless detective, started revisiting every single moment of the past 12 years, reanalyzing conversations, gestures, and silences through the lens of this newly understood trait. The ability to act, to function, to smile, to make love, all while holding a massive, toxic secret within her own heart. It was terrifying. It wasn't just the affair that broke the trust. It was the realization of her deep internal fortitude for deception, however self-protective. I found myself watching her, again, not with suspicion of another man, but with the cold analytic gaze of a criminologist studying a solved case for its methodology. When she laughed, was it genuine? Or was it the trained reflex of a woman who had mastered emotional performance? When she touched my arm, was it love or the habit of comfort? The foundation of our shared reality began to feel like quicksand. This internal investigation peaked 2 weeks after the Rose confession. Dr. Rivas had us doing a structured dialogue exercise, a homework assignment where we were supposed to reflect, in writing, on 3 specific moments from the past 12 years where we felt the effects of the affair most acutely. Sarah's response was brief, focused on moments of sexual withdrawal on her part, attributing them to her feelings of unworthiness. Mine was a dense, 3-page excavation of my internal collapse, my silent self-measurement. But there was a detail in her written response, a phrase she used to describe the AP that snagged my attention like a fishhook. She wrote, "He was so different from you, Matt. He was chaotic, unpredictable. He made me feel the kind of dangerous, exciting tension that I thought I had lost forever." Chaotic? Unpredictable? This flew in the face of the narrative I had built in my head. I had always imagined him as the antithesis of me, a more attentive, maybe smoother, more traditionally romantic figure, a steady but flawed alternative. The why, she confessed, emotional neglect, suggested she was looking for warmth and attention, but chaotic and unpredictable suggested she was looking for danger or escape. I couldn't let it go. It seemed to introduce a hidden motive, a psychological wild card that she hadn't touched on. Was the affair about filling a void? Or was it a brief, reckless escape from the comfortable security I represented, the stability she also claimed to value? I waited until a quiet Saturday morning. We were making breakfast together, a domestic scene of deceptive normalcy. The radio was low, the smell of frying bacon in the air. "I want to talk about the assignment, Sarah." She tensed immediately, expertly flipping a pancake before turning to face me. "Okay, what about it?" "The phrase you used for him, chaotic, unpredictable. You said the affair was about feeling seen, about emotional loneliness,
But chaos and unpredictable, that's about adrenaline. It's about risk. Was there a part of you that didn't just want to be seen, but wanted to risk everything? She set the spatula down slowly. The mask of domesticity dropped, and her face went pale. This was the first time I had pushed beyond the realm of shared blame and back into the territory of her personal darkness. I didn't think you'd focus on that. It was just a phrase. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a window into a motive you haven't shared. I need to know, was the affair a momentary lapse of judgment or a brief foray into a personality you secretly wished you had? She crossed her arms, a classic defensive posture. I don't know, Matt. Maybe a little of both. It's hard to articulate. Look, I felt so small here, so defined by my roles, wife, mother, organizer. He looked at me like I was dangerous, like I was capable of making impulsive decisions, and for a week I was. It was intoxicating. So you ran to chaos to feel powerful? But what about the security, the life you keep saying you're unworthy of? You risked the security I spent years building, the stability you valued enough to stay, for an hour of feeling dangerous? My voice was rising and I fought to keep it level. This was the root of my trauma. I could accept that I was a flawed husband, but I couldn't easily accept that the life I built was so stifling that she needed a jolt of danger to feel alive. It was a moment of insanity, Matt, a total disconnect from reality. I don't romanticize it. I regretted it the moment it ended. But yes, there was a thrill. There was a brief, ugly desire to see what would happen if I pressed the self-destruct button. I was looking for a person that didn't exist, a third man that was neither you nor him, but a version of myself I thought I had lost.
The third man. The idea of the third man hit me with unexpected force. Not the AP, not me, but the self-destructive, thrill-seeking version of Sarah. The hidden motive. This added an element of psychological thriller to our quiet domestic drama. My competition wasn't a flesh-and-blood rival, it was a ghost of her own potential, a hidden aspect of her personality she had briefly unleashed. And where is she now, I ask, my voice barely a whisper. The third man, the woman who craved chaos. Is she still buried inside you? Sarah looked directly into my eyes, her own eyes fierce with a mix of fear and honesty. She's right here, Matt. She's the part of me that is now terrified of myself, the part that knows I'm capable of profound damage. That's why the self-hate is so bad. It's not just guilt over the infidelity, it's fear of the potential for recklessness I discovered in myself. This conversation was a breakthrough. The confession of the rose was about shame and self-protection. This confession about the third man was about her true, terrifying inner landscape. I spent the next few days processing this new information. The image of the AP faded slightly, replaced by the frightening, nebulous idea of this chaotic Sarah. It led me to another question, a logical extension of the AP's description. If the AP was so chaotic and unpredictable, the polar opposite of my own careful, reliable nature, and if she had made the enormous sacrifice of asking me not to tell his wife, thereby protecting his family's stability, there had to be a powerful reason, a compelling fear, beyond the generic kids under 5 reasoning. This isn't detective work anymore. This is self-preservation. I need to understand why she needed me to keep that secret so desperately. The original story was I agreed and said if it would help us move past this, then I wouldn't tell. But my logical mind, now attuned to her hidden motives, screams that there was more. I brought it up on a quiet evening, after dinner, over a glass of wine. I approached it not as an interrogation, but as an exploration of the past decisions we made. Let's go back to D-Day.
the decision not to tell his wife. I made it because you asked, and I convinced myself it was for us. But now that I know how much you value stability, and yet how deeply you craved chaos, I need to know if there was a specific, concrete reason you needed that secret kept, something you were afraid of, not just the abstract notion of hurting his family. She took a slow sip of her wine, her eyes distant. She knew I was hunting for the final, buried secret, the keystone lie. His name was Tom, she finally says, her voice low, almost a breath. Tom Harrison. And he was very, very chaotic. Not just fun chaotic. He had a reputation at the office, not for affairs, but for volatility. He had a temper. He had money problems he joked about constantly. And, I prompt her gently. And the reason I begged you not to tell his wife wasn't just for the kids. I was genuinely afraid of his reaction. He knew where we lived. He knew your routine. I had a momentary flash of absolute terror that if his life imploded, he would retaliate, that he wouldn't go down quietly.
My blood ran cold. This was the detail I was missing, the element of threat. You were afraid he would try to hurt me or hurt the kids? I didn't know. She slams her hand lightly on the table, the wine in her glass shimmering. I just had this sickening primal fear. He was reckless, and if you had gone to his wife, he would have known it was me, and I was afraid of what a man with nothing left to lose would do. I didn't want him in our lives for 1 second more than he had already been. I didn't just ask you to keep the peace for them. I asked you to keep the peace for us, to protect our perimeter from his instability. A terrifying sense of clarity washes over me. The pain of admitting pain was never just about my feelings. It was about finally dismantling the complex structure of fear, shame, and self-sacrifice we had both built. My silence, my agreement to protect the AP's life wasn't just an act of kindness or a misguided attempt to move past the affair. It was in part a response to her silent, desperate plea for physical and emotional safety from a man who embodied the very chaos she sought. I was protecting her from the consequence of her own recklessness. And that burden, the knowledge that I had to contain the threat and my own pain, was the hidden extra weight that crushed my self-esteem. Why didn't you tell me that? Why didn't you say, Matt, I'm afraid of him? Because, she whispers, looking utterly defeated. Because admitting I was afraid of the man I had slept with would be admitting that I had willingly put myself, and by extension, us, in danger for a momentary thrill. I couldn't face you and admit that level of irresponsibility. It was easier to make it about the children, about the higher moral ground. I stand up, walking to the window. The city lights are a distant, indifferent glow. The pieces finally fit, but the picture they form is uglier than I imagined. Our marriage was never an open book. It was a complex safe filled with hidden compartments and mutual secrets of omission, all designed to avoid pain. The third man was not just her chaotic alter ego, it was the potential for real physical danger she introduced into our stable life. Now I understand the true depth of the self-hate. It's not just the infidelity, it's the horror of realizing she put our family at risk. This realization, while gut-wrenching, shifts my perspective on her guilt. It's no longer a passive refusal of my forgiveness, it's an active, ongoing emotional defense against the memory of her own dangerous judgment. I turn back to her. Okay, we need to talk to Dr. Rivas about this, about Tom's volatility,
about the threat. This is the real reason I imploded. Because I wasn't just dealing with betrayal, I was dealing with a containment scenario. We agreed to bring this new, high-stakes information to the next session. The story is no longer about forgiveness. It's about the architecture of doubt and the dismantling of 12 years of mutually assured emotional destruction. The initial wound, the affair, is mostly healed, scarred over. But the structure we built to contain it is rotten. And the fear of the chaotic third man, her reckless self, and the volatile AP is the structural weakness that almost brought down the house. The silence that follows isn't comfortable, but it's honest. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel a strange, cold strength. I have the full truth, the ugly, complicated truth. And the truth, even when it's horrifying, is the only material strong enough to finally rebuild with. The burden of being the keeper of all secrets is finally being shared.
The drive to the therapy session for the fourth time felt less like a drive toward healing and more like a trip to the witness stand. We were carrying the heavy, volatile truth of Tom Harrison, the chaotic AP, and the implicit threat he represented. Sarah was quiet, almost petrified. I felt an odd mix of terror and triumph, the terror of what we were about to expose, and the triumph of finally having the complete truth, the full, grotesque picture of my burden. We walked into Dr. Riva's office, and the air was immediately different. No small talk, no polite preamble. I knew we had to start with the keystone secret. "We need to discuss Tom Harrison," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the acid churning in my stomach. "We need to discuss his volatility. Sarah has admitted the real core reason she begged me not to tell his wife was fear. Primal, genuine fear that he would retaliate against us." Dr. Rivas didn't flinch. She simply watched Sarah, her expression one of focused, clinical empathy. "Sarah, can you elaborate on that fear? What specifically led you to believe this man was capable of physical or emotional retribution against your family?" Sarah's hands were clenched so tightly in her lap her knuckles were bone white. She looked down, unable to meet the therapist's gaze or mine. Her voice was a dry, trembling whisper. "He wasn't stable. I saw flashes of it at work. Little things that should have been red flags but felt like excitement at the time. An explosive, irrational reaction to a minor mistake by a subordinate. A careless, total disregard for boundaries. He had this unsettling, aggressive intensity that I confused for passion. During the affair, he'd talk about his wife and kids with a kind of detached, almost cruel mockery. He made jokes about how easy it was to lie to her. Not funny jokes, but chilling ones." She finally looked up, her eyes glazed with the memory. "I remember one specific time. We were driving, maybe a day or two before I ended it. Someone cut him off in traffic. He didn't just honk, he snapped. He chased the car for 3 blocks, swerving aggressively, screaming obscenities that were truly shocking, completely out of control. When he finally backed off and looked at me, he was laughing, but his eyes were dead, vacant. Right then, I knew I had made a terrible, potentially catastrophic mistake. I wasn't just dealing with a sad, lonely man who needed validation. I was dealing with a dangerous one, a narcissist without an anchor. And when I ended it, I saw a flicker of genuine, uncontained rage. That's why I was desperate for Matt to keep the secret. I needed him to vanish completely from our universe. I needed to protect our perimeter. I watched Dr. Rivas process this. Her pen stopped moving again. The atmosphere in the room was thick with the weight of the potential violence Sarah had flirted with. This shifted our narrative entirely, from a domestic drama of betrayal to a story of survival and containment. Matt, Dr. Riva's voice is low, measured. When Sarah asked you to keep this secret, did she articulate this level of fear? Did she tell you about the road rage, the cruelty? No, I responded, the word tasting like rust. She made it about his young children, the moral high ground. She made it seem like a noble, selfless sacrifice for his family's stability. I agreed because I wanted to believe that if I was noble enough, if I was forgiving enough, we could just erase the event. But the subtext, the real primal threat, was what I absorbed. The knowledge that my wife had put us in potential danger and that I had to contain that potential violence, that chaos, along with the betrayal itself. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. It became a containment scenario. I couldn't grieve my betrayal because I was too busy standing guard against her mistake. My own pain was a dangerous luxury I couldn't afford to feel or express. I had to implode. My self-esteem went so unbelievably low because I felt I had to be strong for the cover-up. So I became pathologically weak on the inside. I was the keeper of the chaos. This was the truth. The pain of the affair was a sudden injury. The fear of Tom Harrison, coupled with my self-imposed protective silence, was the chronic disease that festered for 12 years, destroying my sense of safety and self-worth. Dr. Riva shifts her attention back to Sarah. Sarah, your guilt has been intense. You've been punishing yourself, which Matt rightly identified as a rejection of his forgiveness. Now that we know the full extent of the fear, the potential physical and psychological danger you introduced, does that change the nature of your guilt? Sarah nods, tears finally streaming down her face, but without the defensive tension of earlier sessions. They are tears of profound, agonizing realization. It does. Before, my guilt was about being an unfaithful wife, a bad person. Now it's about the reckless, dangerous choice I made. The third man wasn't just a personality I briefly indulged. It was a risk factor I brought into our home. My self-hate is less about my worthiness of love and more about my deep, paralyzing fear of my own capacity for catastrophic judgment. I was scared of him, but I'm infinitely more scared of the person I became when I chased chaos. I risk everything we build for a cheap, dangerous thrill. The pain of admitting pain, Dr. Riva speaks softly, looking between us, is often the pain of finally seeing the full, ugly consequences of all choices, not just the initial one. Sarah, you need to understand that your attempt to pay penance through guilt is still an act of self-protection. It's a way of saying, I'm hurting so badly that I can't possibly hurt him more. You are still trying to control the damage. She directs her final statement to me, her eyes steady. Matt, you forgave her a long time ago. You truly love this woman and will continue to love her until you were unable to draw breath. But your forgiveness cannot be conditional on her perpetual suffering. The healing you need, the acknowledgement, and the help letting go of the pain requires her to accept that she is not a danger to the future. She has to find a way to forgive herself for the reckless choice, not for the affair itself. She needs to separate the one-time, dangerous action from her core identity. The session ends, leaving us completely drained, but with a new, clear directive. Sarah must work to separate the reckless choice from her fundamental identity. I must work to see her self-hate not as a personal rejection, but as a misguided, lingering defense mechanism. The trauma wasn't just sexual. It was a potential brush with real-world chaos. And we both needed to process that shared, unspoken terror. We leave the office, the ghost of Tom Harrison finally laid bare between us.
The next few days are quiet, almost domestic in their exhaustion. We are both walking wounded, navigating the landscape of our newly complicated truth. Sarah throws herself into the self-compassion homework Dr. Rivas assigned. She's journaling about her values, trying to rebuild her sense of self, piece by agonizing piece. She's trying to believe that the woman who valued security is the true self, not the one who craved the danger of Tom. But the scars have an acute memory, and for me, the quiet moments are still the hardest. I'm in the garage again, meticulously cleaning my tools. The rhythmic manual labor is usually meditative, but the memory comes, unbidden, sharp and sudden. It's not about the mechanics of the affair. It's about the comparison, the insidious measuring I did for 12 years. I continued to measure myself against this mystery man every time I was sexually rejected, every time I was emotionally dismissed, every time I felt unattractive, unwanted, or unworthy of love. The revelation of Tom Harrison's volatility, his true, dangerous nature, has complicated the comparison, twisting the knife. Before, he was the unknown man, the one who was potentially better, funnier, more desirable. I only had to compete with a fantasy of perfection. Now I know he was a cheap thrill, a chaos agent, a potential monster. But my mind, that relentless tormentor, twists the blade in a new way. She chose the monster over you, Matt. She chose danger over stability. Your comfortable, safe love was so secure, so boring, that she ran to the potential for violence just to feel something. This is the new test. I am no longer just dealing with sexual betrayal. I am dealing with existential comparison. Why was safety not enough? Why was I, the bedrock of her life, so easily dismissed for the excitement of self-destruction? I walk back inside. The air in the house is heavy, thick with the smell of a forgotten fear. Sarah is in the living room, curled up on the sofa, a notebook open in her lap. She looks up, her expression vulnerable, fragile. I'm struggling with the self-compassion, Matt. I keep writing, I am a good mother, I am a loyal friend. But the next thought is always, but I am a reckless, destructive force. I chose danger over the man who kept me safe. I sit beside her, pulling her close. I don't offer platitudes, I offer the hard truth. That's the fear talking, Sarah. The fear of the third man you discovered inside yourself. You need to acknowledge her, not fight her. She's part of your past, but she doesn't define your present. The guilt is still trying to define you. But she felt so powerful, she confesses, her voice thick with self-disgust. The self I am now, the one doing affirmations and folding laundry, feels weak in comparison. That's the awful pull. The stability is safe, but the chaos was intoxicating. It felt like power. The chaos was a lie, I countered gently, firmly. It was a momentary escape, a narcotic. It wasn't power. It was self-destruction dressed up as freedom. The power is here. The power is in choosing to stay, choosing to fight for this, choosing to face the pain even when it demands that you look at the ugliness of your capacity for error. That takes infinite more courage than running off for a thrill. I pull back slightly, holding her shoulders, forcing her to look into my weary eyes. This is the moment I make my ultimate, honest demand. I need you to see this, Sarah. I didn't tell anyone about the affair. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid of the judgment, yes, but mostly because I needed to contain the shame and the threat. I wanted to prove I was strong enough to swallow the shit sandwich, but the cost was my entire inner life. Now I've dumped a truckload of my feelings out. I am finally truly vulnerable. You are the only person who knows the depth of my pain and the source of it. My voice cracks slightly, the sound of 12 years of suppressed emotion.
I need you to comfort me. I need my partner back. But you can't comfort me until you stop hating yourself, because your self-hate puts you back on the other side of the wall. It makes you emotionally unavailable. It forces me back into the solitary confinement of my own grief. I cannot comfort the only person who can comfort me. That is the final agonizing loop I need you to break. This is the most direct, desperate plea for connection I have ever made. It's not an accusation. It's a desperate articulation of a fundamental physical need. She searches my eyes, and something clicks. The guilt-driven wall comes crashing down. She doesn't apologize again. She doesn't offer a platitude. She simply turns fully into me, wrapping her arms around my neck, resting her head against my chest, her breath ragged against my skin. I see you, Matt. I see your weariness. I see the years of carrying this alone. I will be your safe space. I will stop trying to be the victim of my own actions and start being my partner in healing. I will fight the chaos for you. It is a small moment, a whispered promise in the quiet of our living room. But in that quiet, the most profound kind of trust is being rebuilt. The trust that she will not let her internal struggle negate my external suffering. The scars have an acute memory, and they will continue to pulse. But the pulse is no longer a silent tremor of fear and shame. It is the steady beat of two hearts, finally, beating together in the rhythm of a shared, complicated truth. The archive of scars is open, and we are finally reading the chapters together. The solitary hell is finally becoming a shared journey.
The final sessions of therapy and the weeks that followed were dedicated to cementing the fragile structure of our new, honest marriage. The foundation was the truth, no matter how ugly or complicated. The walls were the shared recognition of our mutual failures in communication, the codependent cruelty of silence, as I had named it. Sarah's self-hate didn't vanish overnight. That kind of deep-seated guilt, born from a primal fear of one's own capacity for self-destruction, is a shadow that lingers. But it changed. It became less of a paralyzing obsession and more of a quiet, resolved commitment to constant vigilance. She stopped using the language of unworthy and started using the language of responsible. She accepted that her penance wasn't suffering, it was sustained, honest partnership. I too had to evolve. I had to learn to separate the scar from the wound. The wound was the initial betrayal, now healed. The scar was the acute memory, the periodic ache that reminded me of what we survived. I had to stop measuring myself against the ghost of Tom Harrison and the chaos he represented. I had to accept that Sarah's brief, desperate flight was a reflection of her own internal crisis, not a definitive judgment of my worth. The breakthrough came during a session where Dr. Rivas asked us to articulate, for the first time, what we saw as the unbroken covenant of our marriage. What was the thing, the core element, that the affair had failed to destroy? Sarah went first. She took a long, trembling breath, no longer fighting the tears, but letting them fall with a quiet dignity. The unbroken covenant is his love. I thought I had forfeited it. I thought it was conditional on my perfection. But even after all the truth, the betrayal, the long silence, the fear of Tom, the secret of the rose, my self-hatred, he still stands here. His commitment is the one thing I couldn't burn down. He truly loves this woman, me, with all my flaws, with the chaos she almost unleashed. My covenant is to finally accept that love and to stop punishing him by refusing his forgiveness.
Her words were simple, yet carried the weight of a monumental confession. My heart, which had felt like a hollowed-out cavern for years, felt a sudden, profound surge of warmth. Then it was my turn. I didn't have to think. The answer was immediate, crystalline. The unbroken covenant is the life we built together and the fear of losing it. The affair was a lightning strike, a flash of pure destruction. But when the light faded, we were both still standing there, looking at the same house, the same kids, the same future we had committed to. The covenant isn't just love. It's the shared terror of loss. It's the deep, non-negotiable understanding that she is my person. I could have divorced her and moved on, as the internet gurus suggest, but that would have meant losing everything I have been trying to save this whole time. My covenant is the unwavering, stubborn choice to love her, flaws and all, until I am unable to draw breath. I'm not confused about her. My eyes are open on who my wife is and all of her flaws. Regardless of those flaws, I love her. I will continue to love her. That word, choice, was the antidote to the poison of her self-hate. It affirmed that my love wasn't a passive emotion she had been gifted. It was an active, conscious decision she had to respect. One evening, a few weeks after that session, I was working in the garage again, my old muscle car. I decided to finally work on the engine, the part that I had abandoned 3 years ago when the pressure of the containment scenario was at its peak. I was elbows deep in grease, tracing a wire, when Sarah came in. She didn't speak. She just stood there, leaning against the workbench. She was holding 2 mugs of coffee. She offered me one.
"I want to rebuild the engine with you, Matt." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. She barely knew how to change a tire, let alone rebuild a classic V8. "Sarah, you hate grease." "I know, but this car, this whole project, it represents the life we put on hold. The beautiful, complicated, fundamentally sound project that got disassembled because we were too afraid to look at the broken parts. I want to look at the broken parts with you. I want to learn the mechanics of the engine the same way I'm learning the mechanics of your pain. I want to share the physical work of the rebuilding, not just the emotional one." She pulled on an old pair of my coveralls, which were comically large on her, and tied her hair back with a piece of twine she found on the bench. It was an utterly ridiculous, perfect moment. "It's gonna be dirty," I warn her, trying to suppress the swell of emotion. "I'm done with clean. Clean is where the secrets hide. Dirty is where the real work happens." That night, for the first time in 12 years, we didn't just talk about the affair. We didn't talk about guilt or fear or self-hate. We talked about engine timing, torque, and compression ratios. We were greasy, tired, and communicating with a profound shared purpose. It was the most intimate we had been since D-Day. She was no longer just the person who betrayed me. She was the partner rebuilding the engine with me, the partner who had finally accepted the gift of my forgiveness and had returned to the work of our life. The scars, I knew, would always have an acute memory, but the memory was changing its valence. It was no longer a reminder of failure, but a testament to survival. I still occasionally measured myself against the ghost of Tom Harrison. It's an automatic response built up over a decade. But now, when that thought comes, I look at Sarah, greasy coveralls, tired eyes, resolute focus, and the comparison instantly dissolves. He was the chaotic destruction. She is the choice for sustained, difficult, magnificent creation. I don't really know what I was looking for in the silent confession that started this whole mess. Maybe a safe space that my therapist couldn't seem to provide. What I found was something deeper than compassion or support. I found the final, devastating, and ultimately redemptive truth that my healing was inextricably linked to hers. I couldn't be whole until she was brave enough to stop hating herself, and she couldn't stop hating herself until she accepted that my forgiveness was not a fragile gift, but an unbreakable covenant. We're not perfect, We still have arguments, sometimes fueled by the lingering shadows of resentment and insecurity. But now we argue through the truth, not around it. We are two flawed, complicated people, standing together on the bedrock of an honest, difficult love. Having survived the codependent cruelty of silence and the terrifying architecture of doubt, we are finally, truly moving on. Not by forgetting, but by acknowledging that the scars are the map of where we have been and the compass pointing to where we still choose to go. I just wanted to be heard, my pain to be acknowledged, and to be understood that I need some help letting go of it. And in letting her in, I finally found the help I needed.